What's going on? This is Hoppy Hour. I am your host, Ryan Hoppy. And from the legendary Humble and Fred show up in Canada, Humble Howard Glassman is on Hoppy Hour. What's going on, man?
Listen, I can't tell you how excited I am to be part of your thing, especially after I saw your promo on Facebook of you and your, I don't know, bathing suit, underwear, I don't know what you're doing. And you're like, hey, on Hoppy Hour, I'm interviewing Humble Howard. I'm like, I hope you're going to be wearing some pants, for God's sake.
Dude, so I live in Florida, and I was at the pool in my apartment complex where I live with my girlfriend. And I do things for shock factor. So I'm literally right now, whenever I record my podcast at my house, I'm wearing jeans right now, and I'm wearing a nice sweatshirt and socks. So I'm dressed up. I post things for reaction. Like, it got 80 views in like 10 minutes, and that's because I was shirtless. Yeah, so good. You got to work it. You got to kind of...
And, dude, I love it. And by the way, congratulations. Are you going to announce during this part about... your sixth sponsor or sixth sponsor?
Sixth. Yeah, I had that whole moment. I'm glad you watched it. Amir Academy of Boxing Martial Arts here in Tampa Bay. I've known him for 2 years now, and because of that whole thing called COVID, which it doesn't exist anymore here in Florida, he's back. Right. He's back open, so I'm going to be going there. He's not having a lot of people at once, but he's the official sixth sponsor of the show, so I'm going to get back into shape because I haven't really.
Well, listen, man.
I haven't really gained weight, but I've also kind of gained weight. It's a really weird thing. Like, I look the same.
Yeah, I know. I saw that. Listen, I would say, first of all, congratulations, and we'll get back to sponsorship in a second. But you're like American skinny. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. For an American, you're doing all right. You know. And I don't want. By the way, I don't know how long I have. 2 minutes, 10 minutes. I want you to know that this isn't going to be about, some Canadian, bashing you Americans, because, hey, we're all in this together, except you guys. But for the most part, I'm very happy for you. I was going to say I've been following you for a long time. And when you first got a hold of us years ago from, I think you were in Chicago.
Yes.
We were thrilled to have an American sort of friend. And again, I'm happy for your success. And, yeah, man, whatever you want to talk about.
So I'm kind of... Well, first of all, before we get to, I want to see what you think about America before that. So today,
I'm going to tell you that whole thing when I said that wasn't going to tell you. That was all a lie. I'm going to tell you everything I think about America,
and I'm completely fine with it because I agree. So I was listening to your show, and you're having a moment where was it like his Skype kept like skipping or whatever?
No, what happened, and it was wild because it happened this morning for the first time since we've been doing the show on Zoom, which is coming up to a year. He, lots of times on Zoom, depending on whether there's music playing or if you got a lot of people on the call, you'll get those little moments where it kind of, it's sort of late. There's a bit of a latency. Sometimes it warbles. Well, today, and everyone can relate to that because we've all seen it. But today, my broadcast partner was about to say, I'm trying to remember the guy's name. We were talking about, maybe we were talking about OJ or something. But I know, he was going to say Jim Jordan. Again, we're all about American politics in our show. And he went to say Jim, and he got stuck, and it went, Jim, like, and we couldn't figure out what it was. And so he went out of the meeting, and came back in, ding, 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 ding. And anyway, it was one of those things where, technical difficulties, we don't give a shit about them on our podcast. But that one was by far well worth the 5 or 8 minute interruption in the show.
So I was meditating in the other room, and I got almost too relaxed where I was like, oh my God, it's 5:53. I got to interview you in 7 minutes. So I usually do the thing where I set up my Rodecaster board maybe 30 minutes prior to any interview, but I was like rushing. And for some reason, my Bluetooth from my iPhone would not pair to the Rodecaster board. And literally right as I'm getting a call from Toronto with your number, all of a sudden the Bluetooth connected, like literally it was like a buzzer beater. It was the weirdest thing. It worked out. But the funny thing is, isn't it weird that doing podcasts, like it seems like a lot more goes wrong than doing radio, because I produce the talk shows at 102.5 The Bone in Tampa on the weekend. And like, for the most part, everything goes well. You turn on the mics, it goes into executive workflow where it pauses all the programming and you talk, and that, you know how radio works.
Well,
yeah.
It's an interesting question because, Fred and I had done, traditional morning radio for a long time. And for your listeners in Southern Florida, we were kind of like, I'll just say these names for reference. We're kind of like Opie and Anthony, but not really, like Stern, but not really. But we would be in that genre. Would you agree?
Yes, but I think you guys were like a classier Opie and Anthony.
Just for a reference, just because I know a lot of your listeners would have heard of those guys. But we're like a Canadian, we're like a different version, but we'd be in that category. The point I'm trying to make is, for the longest time, we worked on big radio stations, and we had people like you, intelligent, smart, qualified, working on equipment, and that's why, and producing our show, and we had a staff, we had writers and producers. It was quite a production. And then Fred and I, about 10 years ago, started doing a podcast. We both found ourselves blown out of jobs. And about a year into doing it, we were setting up some equipment, as you do with independent podcasters like yourself. We were at some event. We were going to do our podcast from this celebrity event, which, I had hosted a couple of years prior, And all of a sudden, Fred looked at me and I looked at him as we were struggling with the equipment. And we both sort of looked like, we used to have people do this shit for us? And we kind of laughed because, and to your point, Ryan, that's why with podcasts, we're broadcast veterans compared to a lot of people that do them, but we're also not used to having to hump all the equipment. And when shit goes wrong on our show, it's just us to figure it out,
Well, what's weirder is I don't do Facebook Live right now because of like music, and it's just annoying. But when I did do Facebook Live, the worst thing would be when I was trying to pull up a news clip or whatever, and it would like not work. That's when like my part of wanting everything to be perfect, which is one of my biggest flaws. Yeah. That's when I would panic as I'm trying to put on the show. And then that's when I get annoyed. Like when you have a funny thing like Fred going in repeats or something maybe happening on my show or where I work at, that's cool. But I kind of get annoyed with myself whenever something goes wrong, because then I guess the biggest example would be I just upgraded in life. From 2015 till the beginning of this year, I was living in a really bad part of St. Pete in this little like shack of a house that was falling down. And, it was in like a weird part of town, and the house was built in like 1920, and the neighborhood from St. Pete was when they were building Florida. So this was like immigrants were living there. Like it was older than World War II. So what I'm saying is I didn't have a nice setup. So I had a podcast board, but back then I would hold up my cell phone to the microphone.
Right.
Because when I interviewed you, I was recording it at work, but my work was like...
Oh, I know. And that interview you did with me, that was a long... Like you've been at this, you've been in the game for quite a while. I mean, you got to admire that, dude. I mean, I'm glad you've upgraded your situation.
So but there weren't
a lot of people doing what you were doing.
But the worst part, bro, would be like I would interview like a comedian like Ben Glebe or something that took forever to book, and then I'm holding the phone to my microphone, and then it would sound like this. Like it would be really quiet. Like I just turned on the mic for the effect. Like literally I'd be like, so then I'm trying to turn it up with Adobe Audition, and then it sounds like AM radio. And that's what used to drive me nuts. It was like something with the universe messing with me. Like, you're not ready. Like whenever I would have like, but then like I would get someone like Anthony Cumia, and then it'd be fine. But then I don't know. It was a whole thing. It drove me nuts.
Let me ask you, don't you, you're a radio fan. I knew that when we first encountered one another. Don't you think, and I'm a radio fan too, or I'm actually now I think of myself more as a content fan, but my question, Ryan, though, as a radio fan or a content guy that digs that stuff, don't you think that the audience doesn't mind? Like I don't think they notice it the way that we notice it. In fact, let me just wrap up by saying the lesson I've learned from 10 years of doing podcasts is authenticity is what people want. And sometimes they don't even know they want it until they hear it. But once they hear it, it's hard to go back to this regular sort of middle of the road bullshit radio, Yeah.
And I think that's why people are really flocking to Spotify. And I mean, it seems like here in Tampa, like where I work at 102.5 The Bone does well because these radio guys have been doing it as long as you've been in radio. But like, besides that, I mean, these new up and coming morning shows, like aren't really doing well. And it's because it just sounds like they're trying to be perfect. Like you want to go to break perfectly and you got to have everything pre-recorded. Yeah. And I think that's what's,
do you think it's they don't do well because of that? Or do you think they don't do well because in comparison to the real world, canned, formulaic radio morning shows with the funny guy and the giggle girl and the dopey dude, all that shit. It just sounds so fake now when you can turn on this show or Rogan or our show and hear people having like mistakes or made it quick, sound effects, bullshit. But it's like authentic. Like, when I was doing a show in Toronto, when we were the most popular in our sort of mid-30s back in the late 90s, we had a huge share of the audience. And we would have to play 5 and 6 songs an hour, whether Dave Grohl was there for an interview or not, because that's what the programmer thought would, the audience want. And I remember having this discussion saying, talking to Dave Grohl for 5 minutes is nothing. We should have him on for 55 minutes. And he just didn't see that the audience would sit through that. Well, I mean, all you have to do is listen to Stern. And the reason he's endured is he's transitioned from that old, even by his standards, bullshit way of doing radio. And now he'll talk to Paul McCartney for an hour 45. And you know what? People will listen to it.
Howard's a weird one. No.
I feel all of a sudden like I'm not sure if this is where you wanted to go.
No.
Where did you want to go,
Ryan?
No.
I had two things. I was going to say that Howard's a weird one because like a lot of people here in America seem to try to like be him and it didn't really work out. Like they made their millions. Like we had Man Cow in Chicago and like I grew up listening to him.
I know who Man Cow is.
And he made his millions. But then like when I kind of began to like grow up, I realized that Howard was it. And it's really weird, like listening to old Howard and Howard now. But that's a side point. I mean, everyone.
Great point.
But what I was going to ask you, because I was having a brain fart, is what's the key to keep working and doing your show if like a PD or the operations manager doesn't believe in what you're doing? Like, how did you guys keep on keeping on? Because sometimes my show's a little more, I would say 18 to 34 based. It's very hyper. It's very eccentric. It's not really a morning zoo, but I rip into celebrities, the main show I do. And where I work at, they're more dry and laid back and Florida based. And I'm very gritty. I'm from Chicago. I'm unconventional. So what's the key when you don't always fit in a situation, maybe with the bosses or the hosts? How did you guys keep making it work?
Well, that's a great question. Let me see if I can just contemplate the sort of latter part, and then we'll go to the beginning. Mm-hmm. Here's the thing: that the sooner that all what you described makes sense, but the sooner you can get to the part of your career where it doesn't matter where you're from, or gritty or not, or hyper or not, what really matters is are you saying or ripping into celebrities or not? The sooner you can get to what you're really like, and I'm going to say this slowly because I believe it, the sooner you can get to what you're really like as a person on the air, the more connections you'll make. And then it doesn't matter what format you're working, because like when I started off, we were working alternative radio. We were the edgy morning show. We were the Man Cow of Toronto. We were the, Steve Dahl of Toronto. But we were the Humble and Fred show of the 90s and the early 2000s is way different than it is now. Yeah, we're still the same guys. This is getting to the answering your question about how we've endured. Yeah, we're the same guys. And we've been working so closely with one another that it's really unique in our business. It's like comparable to Robin and Stern. I know I'm not comparing us to Stern. No one, not supposed to, but I'm just using that as a comparable. It's very nice to listen to two people that are very intuitive with one another, but we're different guys. Like we were more of the shock jock guys. We were more aggressive, like you're talking about. We were the number one show 18 to 34 when we were in our mid 30s, to your point. So I would just finish by saying that the real key that we've learned, that Stern learned, like I said, he's gone from being fart man to having conversations with Michelle Obama. And like, it's a different world we inhabit now. So that would be my advice, that rather than struggling with how do I fit in, and how do you combat a PD that doesn't like blah, 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 just start working on your chops. Oh, listen, man, you're very good. But still just start working on how do I get to what Ryan, who's the guy that lives in this complex, has got his girlfriend there, has a swim in the afternoon. The more you can be that guy on any show you're doing, the sooner you're going to find it. You're going to be different than the rest of those guys. That's what I said about the canned morning zoo format now. The reason it sounds so bizarre is because it's so fucking fake. I worked at Sirius XM for 5 years, and it was so weird being on the radio. We were on all over North America. So we did 5 years at Sirius up till 2 years ago. And it was so weird being able to actually swear and be authentic, just like you do, like, you know, on every other entertainment platform except broadcast television, although sometimes you can get away with it. Because all cable television, they swear, they're authentic. Those shows are the most popular shows on television, are the most authentic, and they're not on network television. So the only two places you can't be authentic are network television, broadcast television, and broadcast radio.
I don't know.
Why,
go on.
And that's it. But no. First of all, let's both acknowledge what a great answer that was.
No, that was very deep, because
I'm sorry, Ryan. I'm cracking myself up.
Do you love yourself?
I do, right at this moment. No, I don't normally, but right now I'm cracking myself up. No, please continue.
No. I was going to say that was a very deep answer, because I am being myself, but I don't know if it's different in Canada, but like, is the culture of Toronto and like the humor different than, let's say, Hamilton or Montreal, where you feel like you got to kind of blend in more? Or can you do your certain act in Hamilton or Montreal differently? Because like, if you listen, so like, I just can't get Chicago out of me. If you listen to Chicago radio, even like non-shock jock, like if you listen to like top 40 or rock radio, hip hop, sports radio, AM news, traffic reports, anything, it's much more fast paced. It's kind of like how I'm talking now, right, where it's very.
Okay, well, let me just jump in. Yeah, you asked me a question, but I want to ask you a question.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think? What do you think the answer to the questions you asked me are?
I think
leaving Chicago aside for a second.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm sitting across from you, I'm your consultant, and you're telling me what the issues you're having, I'm like, hey, cool, I get that. So Ryan, what do you think you should do?
I think I need to start doing videos of my show online, and I'm trying to figure that out, because Twitch is very confusing and Facebook Live is weird when my roadcasts are bored. But I think I gotta just accept that I'm different and just keep working at it, because I'm being myself when I'm ranting and doing the show, because I'm a very hyper person. And I just think it's just different for me, because Florida is just so different than Illinois. Illinois, like I said, is very gritty. And I think it's probably similar to Toronto, where like you have like a certain swagger about you. Like, you're just kind of like, I'm not giving up, you know, like for example, you have to be courteous to people when you're plowing snow. Like, you would plow your neighbor's snow as well and help them out. And like traffic, you let people in for 5 minutes. But here in Florida, I can't turn right out of my apartment complex for 3 minutes. It's just like, I'm very much like, I expect the most out of people. And then, for example, I go to 7-Eleven and I say thank you, and then they don't say anything. But up in the Midwest, you say thank you and they go, have a great day, go Bears. It's just, I think that's what's going to really help me succeed in radio. And what has helped me is I'm just so different than Florida, because it's like, I'm just outgoing, awkward, hyper kid that loves radio. And down here, everyone's like, yeah, man, Trump's the best president and we're not going to wear a mask. And I just think that's what makes me different than everyone else, is that I'm just so determined about being a Florida person, Howard, while not leaving my Chicago brand. Cause that's just, I'm talking like Chicago right now. Like, I got that accent. It won't leave me. Does that make sense?
I'm kind of, that's a great answer. That's a good what I was going to say is, you know what? One of the things about working for other people is, as opposed to like the Ryan podcast that I'm thrilled to be on. Although I do have a question.
What's up?
How much more hour time are we going to be needing?
How much do you need, or how much time do you have?
Usually when we book someone, we'll say we need you from 8 to 8:30, and then I sort of have an idea because I only have a limited amount of bullshit, so I need to know.
Maybe another.
If I get to my I want to know when I get to my closer. So I've got about another 12 minutes. Is that going to be enough for you, or is that too much time?
That's perfect. Because you don't want to go too long, but you don't want to end it too soon.
No. Okay, so having said that, you asked me some questions about Toronto, Montreal, styles of humor, blah, blah, blah. Now, here's the thing about Canada. Because I was a stand-up. If you want to Google me, you can. Long before I did radio here in Toronto, I did stand-up. I was living in California. I did all that stuff. But you know how in the state, Illinois has a different sensibility than Florida?
Mm-hmm.
Senses of humor are similar on a national level, but there's really some idiosyncrasies about Chicago that you wouldn't get if you lived in Tampa Bay and vice versa. Well, in Canada, we have the same thing, but what we have a little stronger than you guys have is a national sense of humor identity, and it's a very national thing. Yes, Eastern Canada has its Trailer Park Boys, and Western Canada has its corner gas, but all of Canada shares a sort of a very particular sense of humor. And it's interesting because what most Americans don't realize is some of the most influential humor of the last half century in America came from Canada, i.e. the guy that invented Saturday Night Live, Lorne Michaels, turns out he's a Canadian. So our sense of humor has kind of infiltrated parts of America. But what's different about America, having traveled the whole country, is that, there's certain things that are a national sense of humor, politics being one of them. But because the states have such strong individual characteristics, I always found the differences within a state, they really share a certain type of sense of humor. To your point, Ryan, about there's a real Chicago personality, and it's nothing like a St. Petersburg personality. But in Canada, there's fewer of us. So, there's differences province to province. But, 2 or 3 provinces, you'd find very similar people. As you know, you can't get 2 or 3 states that the people are anything like, maybe the Northeast a little bit. But, you go from Texas to New York, you got a completely different American.
Yeah, not just that, but now that I'm thinking about all the things you guys have influenced on us, current music, well, Bieber is a little bit past his prime, but The Weeknd and Drake. And the Weeknd.
Dude, The Weeknd, how fucking weird? Do you understand how weird it is for us? We have a country the size of, we're a larger landmass than America, but we only have 40 million people. That's like California, dude. But there's this so we're like one state worth of people, and we've got Drake and Bieber and The Weeknd, and it's crazy.
I never thought about that. I never thought
Shawn Mendes.
Yeah. I never thought about the population thing, Howard. I guess I never knew that because I just assumed there were a lot of people there. You know what I mean? I never thought about the fact that it's bigger than America, but it's so much smaller population-wise.
We always call it, up here we call it the factor of 10. We have 10% of your population, about. So you guys are 330 million, we're 38 million. But when it comes to culture, what a lot of Americans don't know, and I think, Canadians love playing this game, but, we just named a whole bunch of musicians, but, I'm sure not a lot of Americans know that Alanis Morissette is Canadian. They probably don't think of Celine Dion, Canadian. They don't think of, I don't know, I'm trying to think of a band, but, and then like Mike Myers, Jim Carrey, it's not really like America. Once you're successful in America Americans assume, unless you've got a really weird accent, that you're also American. I know this because I lived there for 4 years, and if I didn't tell someone, and I didn't do a lot of stuff about being from Canada in my act, but everyone I went on stage with and every town I went to, and I was predominantly living in California, so I mainly did Washington State, Arizona, California, and I'd go back and forth to Vancouver up in Canada. But, the fact is most Americans assume all these people we've just named are Canadian. Like, I can't believe that most Americans don't know Jim Carrey is Canadian. Lorne Michaels invented Saturday Night Live. So think about how many people that influenced.
Does it make you guys mad that you don't get enough credit?
You know what it does? It makes us have a bit of an edge to us that Americans don't even realize. We do. Canadians have sort of this facade of courteous character, and we are. It's genuinely part of our nature. But there's this other kind of subversive kids in the hall, SCTV, like that kind of vibe. Lots of the writers on The Simpsons over the years have been from Canada, like Schitt's Creek, Canadian. There's a real sort of sarcastic, snide underbelly here in Canada. And in a weird way, you're going to love this. We actually feel quite superior to Americans. And that's just the truth. We think we're smarter. We think we have better health care. We think we had a better response to the virus initially, although you guys are kicking our ass in the vaccine rollout. But our percentages of the population tested, death, all that stuff, we did 1,000 times better than you guys. So, yeah, up here, we don't really care anymore. We used to be more self-conscious about it. That was before, like, 10 of the 15, highest paid artists in the world right now are Canadian. But what we do feel is sort of a sense of, I don't know, I guess, I don't want to say superiority again, but just a sense of we're okay being Canadians. And I'll tell you what, Ryan, I've never felt prouder to be a Canadian than I have the last 4 years.
Well,
never have felt more pride. And believe me, I grew up idolizing America. It's all I ever wanted to do was to move to the States. I lived in Los Angeles because I saw it on TV. But as you and I both know from living in different parts of that country, America ain't nothing like the America on TV.
Well, Trump aside, because I know you guys don't like Trump at all. Trump aside, what is the biggest problem with America, not including how we dealt with COVID and not including electing Trump? What is an underrated problem with America that you think is not discussed at all?
I'm not sure what you mean by underrated.
Like not talked, like not talked about. Like, would it be homeless? Would it be the fact that everyone needs money from the government?
Well, okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, okay. I mean, it's hard to talk about, and it's not fair. Listen, we got lots of stuff. We got problems here in Canada. We've got a problem with our Indigenous people that you want to talk about. No one wants to talk about. Canadians it's a disgrace. And it's probably for me, our biggest national embarrassment. And we got to be careful when we criticize the U.S. and how America handles minorities. We don't have a lot of stones to throw. So to me, as a Canadian, as a citizen of the other world that's not America, we all think it's weird that you don't have universal health care. Let me finish this sentence. Comma. So there's a comma after universal health care for all citizens. Especially, this is the end of the sentence coming, especially that given that America is so wealthy and such a rich nation in so many ways, that the fact that you don't have universal health care, comma, for all is really one of the most weird. I don't know if the word was underrated, but sort of, I know it's a big issue for you guys, but it is really one of the things when we travel, as I have all over Europe, when people talk about the Americans, it's a curiosity. I was in Scotland a couple summers ago. I was in France a couple summers ago. I've been to Iceland recently. I've been to England a couple of times quite recently. And that really usually comes up somewhere in the conversation, again, especially the last 4 years because of Trump. But after the Trump stuff wears off, it really is a curiosity about the universal healthcare thing.
Yeah, I've never really thought about that because actually there was one time I was at the beach and there is this resort that's really easy to sneak into. So I would go into the hot tub pre-COVID and I would just talk to people. And one time it was this really nice guy and his wife from like Toronto. And that was the first thing they brought up. Literally the first thing and I didn't know what to say. I was like, I don't know why we don't have it. And I think other people, I used to work promotion gigs for the Tampa Bay Lightning and like, all the hockey teams would come down and I'd meet a lot of Canadians. And then actually, this is funny. When they would ask what the bone is like, I would mention you guys and everybody knew who you guys were. I'd be like, you guys, I was like, it's kind of like Humble and Fred from the 90s. So.
Aw. You know, Ryan, first of all, I would like to thank you. You're a very nice person and I've always had a good vibes from you. But I just want to finish this universal healthcare thing.
Yes.
I lived in the States for parts of 4 years, 1985 to 1988. And I traveled all over that area I described, and I did stand up, and I got to meet a lot of people. And even though I was young, I was like 25, 6, 7, and 8, my whole life prior to that, I never had to worry. It was never a worry if I was anywhere in my own country, if I got sick or hurt. But for the first time in my life, in 1985, 6, 7, and 8, I was confronted, and I learned that one of the things that is a weird stress that you have that we don't have. And again, it's not everybody, because lots of people can afford health care. But a good part of the population, even the people that have health care, but maybe not top tier, there's a weird thing that you guys have that we don't have, which is an ever-present, somewhere in the back of your mind, knowledge, but you're comfortable with it because you've grown up with it. This weird knowledge in the back of your mind that if you get sick, you may not be able to afford to cure yourself or get an operation or whatever, right? So we don't have that. Never have, never will. So my whole life living here, I'm always, it's one of the stress killers of being Canadian that we don't have. And it's weird. Like I know it seems odd to you if you're considering it because you've never really thought about it because it's just been there your whole life. Oh yeah, every once in a while you sprain your wrist and you think, oh shit, do I have insurance to fix this? But we never worry about that.
Well, also working in radio, we get tweets of people that have to make GoFundMe accounts to get money for operation all the time.
Yeah.
I never thought about that.
Americans, I think one of the most admirable qualities of Americans is your charitable nature. And I say that with all sincerity. There's a caveat, though. I say that Americans are the most charitable of people. They're very, very open-hearted that way. To a fault, really. But, Ryan, the reason Americans have to be so charitable is because they have to. Because your safety net is kaput. Because people get sick and it ruins them. Well, it doesn't do that in most of the grown-up free world. And so Americans are charitable because you have to be. Those hospitals that they support, St. Jude's and those big famous hospitals, like, yes, we have hospitals here that do fundraising, mainly the children's hospitals, because they're run by the government, but they always need extra and better facilities. So, but that's not supporting our healthcare system. So Americans are the most charitable because you have to be. Like, this whole thing that just happened in Texas. First of all, that would never happen here, where one province was able to, privatize their own grid. Or if they did, it would still have to be within some government guidelines. But the fact that people have to fundraise to save the citizenry would not happen here because the social safety net is already in place.
And also, it's like we don't want to talk about it. So, like, we have all the issues in America, and then it's like girl glues her hair, or girl uses hair and glues it or whatever. I don't even know the headline. Like there's all these dumb headlines are like the cash me outside girl. It's like the news doesn't want to talk about it. So they're like, here's this. It's like they think we're like dumb monkeys and they're like, here, we're going to throw you a banana and just go watch Jersey Shore and don't pay attention to not having universal health care. Like at times, like that's why I don't watch the news is I don't trust it, and it makes me sad because it's like I want to do something, and it's like I'm sitting here and I'm watching things go on in Texas, and I'm like, man, there's really nothing you can do. That's a very defeating part. I never thought about being an American is like you just get kind of sad. You're like you're just used to the tabloids running America, you know.
You know what, Ryan? I'm going to tell you what you just said. There is, yeah, you can't see me, but I'm shaking my head. I'm like, dude, you just summed it up. Because being someone that, you know, we can, once in a while it bugs us that, you know, CNN is referring to other countries and their COVID response, and yet they don't seem to think about how we are, you know, handling it up here, literally 1 hour across the border. But that aside, I feel a little bit sorry for you guys down there because to me up here, and we talk about it on the show all the time, but it's almost like you guys are so broken that I just can't contemplate a way out of the situation you're in. And I get circling back a little bit to the political because the system is so fucked.
I know.
And it's got to be a guy like you with a brain in his head. It's got to make you feel a little bit sad because what can you do? Listen, I'm not saying we can do, but because of the way our construct is in our situation here, we're more ready for when, you know, stuff goes bananas than you guys were.
Well, like, dude, with these relief checks, one guy, Mitch McConnell, is able to go, nope, no one's getting money. Like, it's just like, it's so defeating. You're just like, and I don't like to swear on my show, the guests do, but I'm going to. I will never forget. I was working out in this field with my friend, and I'm like, oh my God, we're going to get money. We're going to be able to. And then I get the news alert that Mitch McConnell says no to it. And I just go, what the fuck? I'm like, what? This fuckhead from Kentucky runs everything.
We're recording this on the 1st of March, 2021. And I'm a little bit out of date right now, or I'm not sure. Did they extend the check out yet?
No.
Or have they approved it yet?
No.
So they still haven't. Okay. So I want you to know last March, when the country closed down, it was about the 12th or 13th of March here in Canada. And people, I know this because my youngest daughter started getting what we call, it's called the CERB, the Canadian something relief, whatever, CERB. And she started getting $2,000 a month within 2 weeks of the pandemic. And she got it for, I think, 4 or 5 months. We got, small businesses were sent checks immediately. We're getting a small business with under a certain employee level was given $40,000 within 2 to 4 weeks. And you only have to pay back, I think 20 of it. And you got to keep 20 of it to help, you know, bridge the gap in your small business. See, my point isn't that America couldn't do these things, but because you guys have this culture of, you know, the states are independent and federal government means socialism. No, what it really means is there's a universal support system for everybody, for all. That's why I said to you, the sentence is universal health care, comma, for all, not just for people that can afford it. Because as we've seen, when shit went bananas here, poor, you know, people, students, people that were hourly wage worker, I was going to say poor people, but people in the lower income levels who didn't have to worry about losing their benefits. So our death toll was down because our hourly wage and lower income workers could go to the hospital for free, and our government sent them money immediately, Ryan. So you guys are the greatest country in the world, or you keep telling yourself you're the greatest country in the world, and yet you fuckers haven't been able to give your citizens a $1,600 check.
I know, and then
so
it's
that's
like,
why if I lived there, Ryan, that's why I would be sad. I'd be sad because you can't get $1,600 out of these ridiculous lawmakers. And at the same time, you've got the rise of the Fourth Reich and that orange fucking nincompoop that's going to be president again. So trust me, I get why you'd be sad living there.
And it's like, you just kind of deal with it. Everyone just says, oh, just deal with it. And then you just kind of live in denial. You're just like, oh, well, I'm going to watch Netflix and forget about it. You know, like you just kind of,
yeah,
I would. It's weird.
By the way, I feel bad now because I'm sure you didn't, expect I'd come on here and, rant about the,
No, I like it.
But hey, listen, man, it's the truth. I can't help it.
No, it's all good. I mean, what were we going to talk about? Patreon? I mean, this is more exciting. I never thought about it,
Yeah. Listen, we have a page. It's funny. We're so Canadian and self-conscious. Like, we've been humble and Fred for a long time, but it wasn't until 7 days ago that we started a Patreon account because we were a little bit shy about, asking our audience, for money. So, but finally we did, and you know what? They've given us some money. So that's cool.
Yeah, here in America, Rush Limbaugh was like, "Give me $50 a month for all the shows."
I know.
What a guy!
Rush is an interesting one.
I'm fascinated.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I found his show repulsive. I couldn't listen to any of it, but I feel like if he would have talked about any other topic, like if he was a little more like Howard or like a Larry King, I think he could have been the best of all time. He was such a good talker. It's insane.
I've been listening to Rush since like 1990. I remember going home for lunch after the show, sitting in my little kitchen, having my sandwiches, and listening to this guy. And I remember telling Fred, I'd heard him before Fred had, and I remember telling to Fred that I found this guy on Buffalo radio who kind of sounds like he's doing a morning show on a talk station. And that's how I described it. He was being funny, irreverent. And in the early days, before I caught on that he was different in the early days. He was right wing, but in those early days of the late 80s and 90s, the rise of conservative media hadn't started. Hashtag the social media frenzy hadn't started yet either. But here's the other thing. I don't think a lot of you guys know this. The reason that the right-wing media became prominent is because until 1987, Ronald Reagan signed this bill that basically made it possible for stations, broadcast outlets, television, radio. It made it possible for the first time for them to not have to bring on both sides of an issue. It was the fairness doctrine. And what that did is it all of a sudden said you could have a radio station that could talk about the Republican Party and not have to bring on the Democrats for equal time. Now, we still have that here in Canada, which is also why we have nowhere near the rise of conservative media that you guys have.
I know.
But that's for another discussion. So Rush Limbaugh, I always say about Rush, what a great broadcaster he was. And I've said that when he passed away last week. Everyone else in Canadian radio, Rush Limbaugh, glad he's dead. And Freddie and I are like, okay, but you can't take away from the fact the man had some crazy broadcast chops. That guy spoke on his own for 3 hours a day, talking to an occasional nitwit from some goofy southern state, but really it was mostly Rush talking on his own. And as you and I both know, that ain't no small thing. And so I got respect for him, even though I thought he was a complete nut job.
Oh, I hated him.
You got to respect that.
But he was such a good talker. It was like almost infuriating for me because it was like, why can't you just talk about anything? Because it was like he was so good, but and from what I've read from radio people on LinkedIn, he was playing a character. I'm sure he believed some of it, but he just saw a market. And it's like, he's almost the smartest of all time because I'm pretty sure he didn't believe half the things he said, but he knew his audience.
It's funny you say that. There's and I'm gonna let you go soon. I'm starting to get hoarse and I got to eat. I'll just finish by saying there's a radio consultant out of New York who I've worked with a little bit, but mostly I've just known her from being in the scene for a long time. And I really respect her. Her name is Valerie Geller, by the way, from you radio nerds out there. And it was Valerie Geller. She's one of those women that shows up at these conventions. I shouldn't say, but she's just a broadcaster and a consultant. shows up at these conventions. Like I said, I've been at some stations with her. She said recently that one of the things that inspired her to want to be in radio is the first time she heard or met Rush Limbaugh. And her memory of him was of a pretty sweet guy. And so to your point, Ryan, a lot of that is just an act. As it is, by the way, let me finish by saying the whole thing's an act, as it is, by the way, for Sean Hannity, Tucker Carlson, Laura What's-Her-Douche. That whole scene, Sean Hannity is also another great broadcaster. When you listen to Sean Hannity do his radio show, you can really hear how good he is. I think he's a horrible person.
Oh yeah.
but I do respect his ability to create content that's compelling. How's that for a way to end?
Hell yeah. And actually, it was her that I saw on LinkedIn, and I've spoken to her via email before for advice, but it was her post that she put up on LinkedIn talking about how she didn't like how he became vile, but that when she worked in New York City, that he was just a really nice guy.
Well, I've met her on many occasions and always delighted in listening to her as a consultant, because she just has, it's funny. She's one of I've had a lot of male consultants, but only a couple human female. And I always found her just a great way of giving out notes without making you feel like you should never do this again.
Well, it's been a lot of fun having you on the show. It's crazy how far I am from. It's crazy how far you are from me right now. I'm literally on the bottom of the continent, because at least in Chicago, I was like 9 hours away. Now I'm like 90 hours away. It's crazy how far I am, but I recently began listening to shows from the past, just kind of trying to remember why I got into radio, and I started listening to you guys, and I was like, holy shit, I remember when I used to listen every day, because I just kind of got self-centered and was on a whole thing of being in my mid-20s, and now I'm listening to you guys every day, and I don't know why I quit doing it, but keep up the good work, man.
Oh, Ryan, you know what? I really appreciate your well wishes, and I hope this was okay for you.
This was great.
I didn't know where you wanted to go, but I really enjoyed it, and I was very flattered you asked, and always lovely hearing from you, buddy. And, stay strong, America.
Yes.
We're pulling for you.
We are
crazy
too.
Bastards. You crazy bastards. What are you doing? That's all we think up here. What are they doing? Well, we love you, man.
Well, man, keep up the good work. Thank you, man.
All right, pal.
All right, bye.
Thank you. Take care.
All right, bye. And that was humble Howard Glassman from the Humble and Fred Show. If you guys want to check out my show, you crazy Canadians, it's not hard. It's not rocket science. Go to every single podcasting platform that Humble and Fred are on and search up Hoppy Radio, HOPPE Radio, and spread the word. I love Canada. I've never been there, but spread the word.
Hoppy. This is Hoppy Hour.